Welcome to the Ultimate Bloons TD6 strategy series, where I'm going to be showing you strategies for every single tower from the Dart Monkey to the Beast Handler and every single path in between. This will show you how to diversify your setup and get better, along with seeing some stats, tips and tricks, and all of the strategies for every single one of the towers. And although that the series is geared more towards Chimps mode, this will also show you a lot of tips and tricks that apply to the standard game and will allow you to win with a new style. Moving on to the middle path of the Engineer, we have the Ultra Boost, the Overclock, and the Cleansing Foam. 2 out of 3 of these guys will be useful. The other one just looks very, very cool, so let's roll with it. So the Cleansing Foam can be used for decamo, and it's an early game slowing tower, which is actually pretty cool. A lot of people didn't know that. Overclock has that Overclock buff and can also do some decamo. And then Ultra Boost is very expensive, but it does look pretty cool. So for the stats, the Cleansing Foam just has really the regular foam, and then you can also get like sentries and stuff with that. And I'll talk about the crosspaths for this later. It's actually kind of interesting. So this video is longer than you might have expected, because you might just think of this path as only having the Overclock, which shows up here. But there's a bunch of cool little tricks that you can do with the foam and all of that. And it's particularly some tricks that you might see in more like advanced or expert level gameplay, which is pretty cool. And then the Ultra Boost, just look at this guy. The sunglasses really does it for me. He's just a pretty funky dude, so I'll keep him in. And now let's go on to the crosspath. So for the foam, if you're using the foam just for decamo, you would go 030, but there are uses for the other crosspaths. So as we can notice, originally the foam with pin, so the pin foam does slow down balloons in its range or radius of the foam placement, not the entire range of the tower, which is pretty interesting. So you can see as the balloons go over, they get slowed down a little bit. Now, as I honestly don't find this as useful as other people find it, but it is a pretty cool thing that you can use in your gameplay, and I recommend you do this if you're going to be going for the foam or the overclock anyways. As another option, you could throw pin on there for really cheap and get some decamo. And then if you're using overclock just for the ability, you don't need a crosspath, any of that. But for the other crosspath, those turrets, you can use those turrets if you're using it for like the early game, like you need turrets, and then you can go into the foam for overclock or for the foam whatever. But the foam with the top path does shoot out the foam faster, so if you're using this for decamo, you can typically decamo a bit more with that. Although that being said, it will still be inconsistent on some specific rounds. So you could have like a 230 foam that would very consistently get DDTs but not other things, and we'll see that a bit later on when looking at our examples. So when it comes to the buff, you're going to want to buff towers that have a value that do direct damage of roughly about 30,000. This isn't exact, but it's just because that you don't want to spend more money on a tower that you're going to be getting less buff out of. And by the way, for tier 5 towers, it's not going to have full uptime, and it's only a 66% attack speed increase. So it's not like it's going to be crazy effective on most monkeys. But if you have something like that Archmage, for example, you could get an overclock and would be very good. Just watch out for towers that won't receive the full overclock, like this Comanche Commander, for example. Its sub towers won't be buffed. So if you're given the option between like a Comanche Commander and Inferno Ring, you'll definitely want to do the Inferno Ring, because that's going to be receiving all of the buff, and it is a pretty nice expensive tower, so it is going to be doing well. This doesn't mean that you always have to overclock expensive towers like this. There are some cases where you just won't really have the money and would be better to do some other things. But if you, for example, get this case where you have a tax zone, you wouldn't really want to overclock it, because it's like a lot of money compared to the overclock itself. But we're looking at the value damage of the output itself. So if we have that tax zone with like some village buffed and a super brittle, now it's going to be worth it, because the value of damage compared to the price is including that super brittle too. This would be a very good example, except for the fact that tax shooters absolutely suck on this map, so it isn't going to pop all the balloons. But anyways, I hope you really get the point for that one. And for the maps that it's good on, it's a support tower, so it's going to be good on whatever it's going to support. So pretty simple there. And then when it comes to the heroes, it's pretty much going to be the exact same thing. Just use whatever hero you're going to be overclocking, and that's all it goes. In the root of it, it's a pretty simple tower. So the pros is that it's an amazing buff, it's easy to use and works very well. It has cheap decamo and a cheap balloon. So the cons is that you can't buff multiple towers. It does require some attention to use for the overclock ability, and you get inconsistent decamo if you're using just the foam. And there are kind of ways around that and very good uses for it, and other times of course that you wouldn't want to use it. So our objectives are going to be looking at the overclock, the foam decamo, and then the foam slow. And I think out of all of the videos, that was by far the longest intro. That was about 5 minutes long, just talking about the base tower. Kind of interesting. So now let's take a look at just some examples, and I'm going to have one example Chimps game, and then we're going to look at like examples of what to overclock and kind of talk about the foam more so with this example. So basically, I can start off with an NG here. There's a lot of maps where NG start is very good, and I can just go for a pin NG with range. Now, the other crosspaths going for like pin sentries or double guns is a lot more effective when it comes to damage. And you need to keep that in mind. If you actually need the damage, you don't want to go for this route. In fact, this route for like a black border is very rare. You really only see this for like more expert level gameplay. But what this will allow you to do is go for very good decamo that will just get you camo through like around 42, even like higher than that if the map is kind of longer. But just for one single lane, to keep up with consistency, I'd really end its reliability off at around 42. So for cheap, you can get a tower that does a decent amount of damage. It's not going to be like crazy, but usually your like other heroes, like in this example, will be able to supplement it. It will get a little bit of slow, and you'll get camo covered to around 42, which is really nice. So I did have to get like another triple dart monkey in there to really help out. But what's better with this is that I'm going to have a tower that's going to go straight into overclock. So theoretically, this tower got me through the early game and got me through all the camo rounds for only like $400, because I'm only taking into account to the cross path, because the reasoning behind that is that if I'm going to have to get overclock later, that money would just be spent there on overclock in the long run. So using this can actually like make things pretty cheaper, and as you can see, it takes at around 42. So we have that all done, and for a very cheap early game, we got by with a nice foam, and the foam will of course slow some stuff down if you have pin. So that's kind of like an example of using it. But now taking a look at more overclock, as I mentioned, you can decide not to overclock or overclock your tower. You can even go on the cheaper scale and like overclock something like a crossbow. It may not be fully efficient, but if you want to really just enhance that power of that one tower, or say you have like a super glue and you can get more value out of that tower for damage, you can do that. Other alternatives are if you have an MIB and you have just like a lot of towers, or the tower works off with CTA well, you can just use CTA buff instead of overclock, because the overclock will only be able to buff one thing. Or you could use something like a damage debuff like a glue storm, which would be able to give effects to all of the towers on the screen. Or instead you could try to add a very cheap damage tower like Super Maelstrom, which honestly doesn't get as much appreciation as it should, instead of getting an overclock. However, with more expensive towers, usually it is more optimal, although there's still sometimes where you may not do it if money is an issue and you need like something to counter 100. But when it comes to the big expensive towers, you're usually only gonna have like one Apache Prime, as in for the example of the Chimps game I'm doing, or like Dark Champion, and you'd always kind of want to overclock that. And then of course, as mentioned before, as in this example, out of the helis, only one of them will be good with overclock. The others, they're based on sub towers, it won't work, so you need to keep that in mind. So anyways, going back to this example, we got our Apache Dart chip, we can get our Apache Prime, and now for the cost of not having to buy the tier 3, as mentioned before, in the long run this will save money, we can just grab that overclock ability on the foam. So now what I'm trying to like say here is that you don't always want to be going for a foam early game if you have overclock. A lot of times it's just not going to work. Like you won't have the damage. As I said, double guns or sprockets just does way more damage in the early game, and it's not going to really work out all the time. But if you're looking for optimizations, or you're looking to kind of advance your gameplay to more like expert level abilities, this is something that you can look into. And you also do need to keep in mind that it can be used very effectively in terms of saving even more money because it can allow you to skip out on a camo village. So let's take a look at this example here. We can get a discount. Yay, we love discounts. We don't have to get camo village, so we can get drums under discount. But then this Inferno Ring doesn't pop camos. So when it comes to these DDTs, you can very cheaply get a foam, and of course if you're getting an OC with this, you just have that value included. It's free decamo. I guess it's even saving you money because now you can get discounts and save money. We do love discounts in here. So as you can see, this can actually just take out like unlimited DDTs. The foam itself can really deal with DDTs, but when you go into a Chimps game, you have to think of like everything. So we do have our good value. You can like increase the attack speed just with that cross path for a little bit extra, and it will do well too. But when it comes to around 95, even with the cross path, this is not enough. You're just leaking everything. In other rounds, like 78 too. So a lot of times you can really cheap out if you're planning to have like a spike factory, which is great for cleanup. So if you have like this Inferno Ring with a spike factory, or just another second tower that deals with camos, maybe not directly, it can just clean up whatever, like the Spirit of the Forest for example, you'll be able to have that foam removing the camo on the DDTs, so your bigger, heavier tower can deal with all of that, and you just have something maybe in the back that can deal with enough camos. Like really round 78 is kind of like half of it from what the foam doesn't get is what it's going to have to deal with. But if you have that, like say for this example in the mid game, or you're just getting like a spike factory down there to be able to tank some of the camos that are kind of leaking, then you can cheap out and get discounts, get the foam, and not have to buy camo village, and it can save some money. And it may not be saving that much money. It could be just like $2,000, $3,000 saved, but in the long run, with that trick and many other tricks that you can use to save money in early game, you're saving like tens of thousands of dollars in a Chimps game when you put all of these together. So that's just one of those tricks that you can put in the bag that all of like these expert players like me, I guess, are using to really get insanely cheap runs. Like if you, for example, just see some of like my challenge gameplay, you'll see like Sanctuary Chimps with random tower 1, random tower 2, and like 60,000 cash spare that I actually just uploaded this morning. That was AZ and Bomb Blitz. But just like all those tricks combined, you can beat Chimps games with like 50, 60, 70,000 cash spare on expert maps. So yeah, it's pretty darn cool. This run, well, this video was kind of looking more at expert challenges, but we never got Ultra Boost, so that's
Thanks for watching. If you want to help out the channel, you can check out these new videos, like and subscribe for more content, support the channel by becoming a member, and joining the Discord to chat with the community. Bye!